So I'd like to now hand over to Steve Bates, who's going to talk from the perspective of the BioIndustry Association.
Jackie, thank you very much. And in my 10 minutes, I'm very sorry not to be in the Hindle room enjoying the great hospitality at the Royal Society of Biology, but from my home office in Streatham in South London. I hope I can give you a flavour of, a policy flavour of how the biotech ecosystem, which includes everybody from academics and university players through mainly my main focus are the members of the BIA, which are companies, through to government, have responded very differently in networking and systems remodeled during the COVID era. I think the first thing I should stress is that although discovery research is usually blue skies, much of the work that's been done on, in terms of discovery of medicinal products has in a sense been very close to blue skies research, because this is a disease that nobody was working on last year. So the thing that I think is really, really interesting first off is that the feedback loop between understanding a disease and applying that to practical challenges of either testing or developing a therapeutic or developing a vaccine has been happening at an immense pace, which I've never seen before. I think that's the biggest change from my perspective, is that how that networking systems has come together. And Jackie alluded to the fact that everybody is now working off pre-pubs, everybody is waiting for this stuff, and that is then actioning in real time some things which are likely to be seen in an IKEA car park near you within a few weeks. And that's some of the reasons why I think when things don't work in a practical sense, or you have a challenge in some of the testing regime, or we have ambitious hopes for certain molecules which then are either proven or unproven by rigorous scientific clinical trials. All of this is happening at an immense pace, and with the immense spotlight of all of this being not only in academic journals and learning discussions like this, but also in the middle pages of The Sun and in the Daily Mail, which, as you know, is a fantastic way of getting clear scientific advice through to the public. But I think it is just a different era. From the BIA's perspective, I suppose the BIA is the Trade Association for Innovative Life Science Companies. The reason why we got involved in this is, I suppose, we sit here as the voice and the face of the sector, largely to government, and work closely in that policy space, in that interaction space. So we're well used to getting ready for a comprehensive spending review, supporting bids from UKRI, having a question about the balance of where the 2.4% should go. And one of the things that happened during the COVID crisis was government fundamentally melted down and reorganised several times week on week. So one of the questions we got first off is, who's in charge and who's doing what, and who do I put this stuff into, and who's making decisions? And one of the networks or systems that was remodeled by COVID was, in a sense, the government systems. Suddenly you had new processes and new organisations emerging. NHS Track and Trace emerged, the Lighthouse Labs emerged, the processes for the Therapeutics Task Force under UKRI emerged, the Vaccine Task Force emerged. None of these entities, which are now making significant decisions around billions of pounds worth of UK investment, existed in February. So I suppose one of the reasons why we've been close to this is we've been helping people understand how that change has happened in real time, and ourselves trying to understand who is doing what and where they're doing it. So that's been one factor in this. The discovery of medicinal products has engaged with an entirely new discovery of how to use them in the UK context. I've got 5 areas, I think, if I can quickly touch on, where I think the way that people working has fundamentally changed, and new collaborative approaches, which I think Jackie's right in saying are, I hope the legacy we get from this awful period, have emerged and made a real difference. And I'm just going to give the examples, and if people are interested, we can talk more about them in the discussion, which I'm really keen to get to later. One that I've been closest to is in the development of manufacturing of vaccines. So BIA has a group that looks at the manufacturing capabilities in the UK, particularly around cell and gene therapies and other advanced products. And as a result of a discussion in February between the gang in Oxford, who were at that point developing their thinking around a vaccine, we bumped into them and had a discussion around, well, how we're going to make it and what's the volumes and if it was to work. And it was almost a chat in February. So we got together and we thought, well, maybe we should do a survey to see who's got what capabilities and what capacity have they got in the next few months if this was to get going. So did a quick survey. We'd done one similar around the time of Ebola to see what people had capability to do. Sent it into Patrick Vallance. And Patrick, if this is of use, this is what we've got. This is the people that we've got. Can you do mRNA? What's the capacity in the UK for mRNA? Came back the question, well, we haven't got much, but we'll ask around. Our network came together. Well, actually, if you've got these people over here, these people over here, we could maybe move that forward. Certainly by then, the Chadox vaccine was going great guns, and they were looking for clinical trial scale up. And then there's obviously questions as to how you do that, and then capacity to do that. What this meant was by March and by April, we really had a plan to be able, we thought, in a viable way, if this works and if you want to make it at risk, these are the people who can do it, and these are the things you need to buy in order to do this across the summer into the autumn and further on. And it's a fantastic example of how communities come together to give a vaccine candidate the real ability to turn from that, which is an incredible piece of discovery, into a medicinal product if it works. And I hope it will. And we are in the midst of that clinical trial. So the manufacturing community have come together, and that's because in part they knew each other, in part from meetings like the BIA's Biomanufacturing Conference, bioprocessing, and in part because there had been networks established in academia and with industry over a decade, so people knew and trusted each other. An antibody development group came together under the leadership of Jane Osborne, the BIA, to try and make sure, working similar in the way that Jackie's talked about, repurposing of drugs in a novel way could happen very quickly. Screening very fast different types of antibody that were gathered from a whole host of different ways with different properties, and they are at this week in a screening process to try and make sure that we've got novel types of antibody that don't just work against spike but work against all different methods for tackling COVID-19. Again, an immense piece of people coming together, largely because it's a network that knew each other before, some great companies, Kymab, and others involved. Testing consortia have come together. We obviously knew about the ventilator challenge back in the day, but testing consortia, if you look at how the Medicines Discovery Catapult was at the heart of developing and leading out the Lighthouse labs, which are the big labs that are doing some of the heavy lifting on lab work for the testing consortium, that they came together immensely. What was interesting here was actually much of the challenge in getting this together in a new way was data, and Jackie's talked to it. There were many people who had fantastic labs. Trick was not really could you run things through your labs, it was did you have the capacity to integrate the data in and integrate the data out. And I worked very closely with the Crick and Paul Nurse and the gang there about the work that we were doing around small ships to work at non-traditional labs. How could they be scaled? How could they integrate? And really the clunkiness was really not around how labs ran, but how the data ran in and out and how that integrated with the mobile capacities that were coming from the NHS and integrating back into the NHS. And one of my big learnings is actually it's not always the discovery science or at the same time as people were doing a lot of novel thinking around testing, the big challenge was how does that link into a process that actually works in practice. Clinical trials. We've had a sort of a strange period of clinical trials in the last few months where some people have had their clinical trials stopped as the NHS has stopped doing, if you want, what it used to do and focused almost entirely on COVID. But the silver lining to that was that the effort was focused on recovery and the setting up of other key trials. which meant that as the UK opened the medicines cabinet and tried a few things in a very controlled way, we were able to discover and get to some rigorous clinical data on a traditional steroid that makes a real difference for a particular segment of COVID patients, which is fantastic. Other healthcare systems had opened their medicines cabinet, but I'm not sure that they had done it in the rigorous and scientific way which the UK was able to do, in part because of a decade of investment in NIHR, investment in clinical research as an infrastructure within the UK ecosystem, much of this in the NHS, but with an academic base that could shift to doing this, and with the ability to recruit and support such a trial. And I think that has been fantastic. The final network that's come together is perhaps a more obvious one from the BIA's perspective. The CEOs have come together and made sure that they have lobbied effectively for the funding support needed for the businesses, and I see this is also happening in the charities through the AMRC and the universities through their organisations. But the ability to get together, understand what the problems are, and then make sure in policy terms that the massive series of interventions we've seen from the government, and here I'm thinking about the Future Fund through the British Business Bank, because that's the one that applies to VC funded companies, the biomedical catalyst, but I know there's also other ones that are available through the other bits of UKRI work for my constituency, and they got together, made sure that the bits were working for them, and they were working together. Equally, that group made sure that they made clear to us that they wanted to be a part of the critical workforce and therefore continue to be able to run their labs during lockdown, and we were able to secure that, and I know that's been a bit of a difference in some of the universities where university labs have stopped doing work, but I think that's another example of people coming together to ensure discovery happens in a different way. I'm going to finish, Jackie, with a couple of thoughts which may provoke questions later on, really around the BIA and then the government. So the BIA has fundamentally changed how we've worked, and we've remodeled our events. We're well used to working through Zoom. We worked through Remo and others to try and provide new ways of doing networking. And one of the things that we've discovered is some of the people who used to have to spend all their time on planes to America to get VC funding have found that VCs are quite happy to take a Zoom call now because that's all they can get. And people have managed to continue to get substantive funding and maintain contacts with VCs as the efficiency of that process has gone up, which is a good thing. Let's hope it continues. European engagement. If you look at the Horizon calls or the recent data, the UK is still a significant player in most of those Horizon 2020 and COVID calls, which is good to see, although I saw from the last one this week, the UK isn't actually leading any of those consortiums, although we're still integrated in it, so it's interesting to see that. And finally, I think one of the things I reflect on is, where does this period leave government's discussion of science for us and discovery research? Well, on one level, it shows the vital importance of life sciences as the heart of a solution to getting the economy going again, and being at the heart of the response to a thing that has a significant risk to the nation, a pandemic. Therefore, having a life science sector capability and the types of things that everybody involved here in is vital to the nation. So it's put us up the agenda. I think the flip side of this is that COVID is going to, or the impact of the COVID period is going to have an impact on a number of institutions which work in different ways. Obviously, universities are fundamentally affected, not simply by the recent shutdown, but you can see it in A-level results tomorrow, Chinese students, and because of the way that universities work and in a sense cross-subsidise certain elements of their business into what biological researchers tend to be more expensive. The fallout of COVID onto universities is going to have an impact on us. We need to be conscious of it. Charities have obviously taken a big hit with nobody running the London Marathon or doing cycles this summer or whatever it is. That's really, and they're a big supporter of our sector, and perhaps we'll hear more about that in a couple of minutes. But that's going to be an impact. And in our sector, I think it's too early to see the impact on companies. Some companies have obviously done very well on the opportunity and have risen to the occasion, have had the capacity or the technology that works and suits this space. Others have found themselves unable to hit their milestones because things have been shut, and that may be more difficult. But I think where I'm interested in where this goes to, because I think the government is now increasingly focused on a route out of economic recession. They can see that the life science sector is one element of that, but I do wonder whether there will be an elision or a tension perhaps between showing that discovery research now needs to and can, as a result of COVID, work far more closely with what traditionally would have been called translational research or other things. So maybe there'll be some pressures in that space. And of course, we'll have whatever Dominic Cummings' brainchild of ARPA being developed during the coming period. And that may put the cat amongst the pigeons in terms of the policy landscape which we'll operate in. Although I see that the comprehensive spending review, which we were expecting to be in the summer, if you read the FT today, may be delayed to next year. So who knows? Jackie, I hope that provides some food for thought, some thoughts on what's gone on, and I look forward to the discussion later.
Thank you, Steve. That was great. A really comprehensive introduction, and this, I think, will prompt a lot of discussion from people.